They killed Grace. For 3 years, that monster base slid up to my dock, every sunrise fins flashing like polished bronze in the light. I named her Big Grace, fed her scraps, watched her turn from a decent fish into a lake legend. This morning she was floating belly up beside 200 other corpses, my family's spring-fed lake glowing the sick green of antifreeze and bad decisions. The chemical stink hit first sharp metal chlorine and rot, and then the rage came. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped her slick, lifeless body back into the poisoned water. That's when I saw the invoice tucked under my truck wiper and the name printed on it, a commercial algae company paid in cash by my HOA president, Lucy Parker. And here's the beautiful part. Every glass of water in Lucy's fancy Cedar Ridge estates comes from the same underground spring that feeds my lake. Before I dive into how I turned her own water against her, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, drop it in the comments and hit subscribe so you don't miss how this one ends. I've lived beside this lake my whole life. My grandfather, Harold Cook, bought these 12 acres back in 1954 when Maple Ridge, North Carolina was nothing but tobacco fields and gravel roads. He built this lake with his own hands, a spring-fed mirror framed by pines and honeysuckle, and told my dad, "Water is freedom, boy. You control it, you survive anything." That sentence meant nothing to me as a kid. Now at 52, it feels prophetic. Every morning before the sun tops the trees, I walk the same gravel path he laid boots, crunching over stones worn smooth by generations of fishermen. The wooden dock creaks under my weight, still damp with dew, and the smell of honeysuckle mixes with the clean mineral scent of spring water. Blue herons nest in the cypress trees, frogs croak near the reeds, and for decades this place has been pure, quiet peace. Until the HOA moved in. 15 years ago, a developer named Suncrest Realty bulldozed the surrounding farmland and turned it into what they called Cedar Ridge Estates, 847 cookie-cutter dream homes, each starting at $650,000 and boasting exclusive lakeside living. I still remember the day they tried to buy me out. Some guy in a tailored suit stood on my porch, smiled like a used car salesman, and said, "Mr. Cook, we're prepared to offer you $2.8 million for the land and water rights." I laughed. Told him my family wasn't for sale and neither was our lake. He didn't like that answer. A few months later, bulldozers started growling less than 200 yards from my fence line, and the smell of diesel replaced the honeysuckle. The first few years weren't terrible. Most of the new neighbors were decent people, doctors, teachers, families who waved when they jogged past or asked about the fishing. Some even brought their kids down to see the lake, respectful enough to ask permission first. Then Lucy Parker arrived. If you could crossbreed a lawyer with a wedding planner and a dictator, you'd get Lucy. Mid-40s, platinum blonde hair that probably has its own budget, always in a tailored blazer even when she's walking her dog. Drives a spotless white Lexus that gleams like it's afraid of dust. She talks in PowerPoint slides phrases like property value optimization and aesthetic enforcement protocols. Lucy moved in during the summer of 2020. By Christmas, she'd become HOA president. I still don't know if it was an election or a coup, probably both. Within 6 months, she had Cedar Ridge running like a suburban military base. Lawn height inspections, fines for trash cans visible from the street, banned holiday decorations that didn't fit the community color palette. At first, I didn't think she'd care about me. My land sits outside the HOA's recorded plat, separated by a stone fence built by my grandfather decades ago. But one morning, I got a letter, fancy envelope, gold seal, like something from Buckingham Palace. It read, "Dear Mr. Cook, your fishing activity on the Cedar Ridge lakefront property has generated multiple complaints from residents. Please remove your unsightly dock and refrain from future disturbances that negatively impact property values." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Cedar Ridge lakefront property. My family built this lake before her subdivision even existed. I mailed her back a copy of my deed and a post-it that said, "Wrong lake, wrong man, wrong century." That's when the real fun started. Within a week, leaf blowers roared along the property line every morning at 6. Workers in neon vests mowed the same strip of grass for hours, their diesel fumes drifting across the water. It was like she'd declared psychological warfare through landscaping. Then came the surveyors. I woke up one Tuesday to find 3 trucks parked near the old stone fence, laser tripods, and measuring rods pointed toward my dock like snipers. Their equipment probably cost more than my entire truck. I walked down there with a mug of coffee. "Morning, fellas," I said. "What's the show?" The lead guy looked nervous. "Ma'am from the HOA wants boundary verification." Ma'am from the HOA doesn't own this land, I replied. But you go ahead and finish. I like to watch people waste money. 6 hours later, they left. 3 days after that, another certified letter arrived from Lucy. According to her independent survey, my dock extended 6 inches onto community property. 6 inches. On a lake that's been legally in my family since Dwight Eisenhower was president. The letter gave me 30 days to remove the illegal structure or face legal consequences. I called my buddy Jacob Miller, a real estate lawyer who saved me from bureaucratic headaches before. When I read him the letter, he nearly choked, laughing. Adam, HOA covenants can't apply retroactively, he said between laughs. Your property predates that HOA by 60 years. She's threatening you with laws that don't exist. Still, I filed the letter away just in case. People like Lucy never stop at letters. Sure enough, a county inspector showed up a week later. Poor guy looked exhausted. I'm just here because someone filed an anonymous complaint about an unsafe dock, he said. I handed him the old 1,987 repair permits signed by the county engineer. He glanced at them, shrugged, and said, "You're fine. Have a good day." I watched him leave, shaking his head, probably wondering how suburban politics got this ridiculous. That night, as the sunset turned the lake gold, I realized Lucy wasn't just annoying, she was dangerous. The kind of person who hides behind fake smiles and legal jargon, convinced the world belongs to her because she can afford a retainer. And I wasn't dealing with a simple neighbor dispute anymore. This was the start of a war. I tried to keep the peace, kept fishing, kept quiet, documented every letter, every inspection, every coincidental noise barrage. But Lucy wasn't after peace, she wanted control. Over the lake, the view, and anyone who dared ruin her fantasy of suburban perfection. She started showing up uninvited, standing just outside my property line in her sunglasses, phone out like she was recording evidence for some fake lawsuit. You know she'd call out, "This whole area will be safer when it's properly managed by the HOA." I'd just smile. "Good luck managing something you don't own, Lucy." She'd flinch every time I said her name, like it reminded her she was human. Then one morning I noticed something strange. New signs posted on the trail, leading to the lake from the HOA side, private community access only. Trespassers will be prosecuted. I stared at those signs for a long time, the absurdity sinking in. They'd nailed them into my grandfather's fence posts. That's when I knew this wasn't going to end with polite letters. Lucy wasn't trying to protect property values. She was trying to erase history. And she had no idea that the quiet man across the lake, the one she called a backwoods squatter in an email she accidentally sent to the county, owned the very water flowing under her $1 million home. Because in Maple Ridge, the ground remembers, and so does the water. 2 weeks later, the certified mailman stopped by again, and I swear the man looked embarrassed, just handing me the envelope. "She keeps sending these things," he muttered, like she's running the White House. The envelope was the same embossed gold logo of Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association, legal tone thicker than tar. Inside, Lucy Parker had escalated. Notice of violation. Your dock deck and shoreline structures are encroaching 6 inches into community-controlled waterway. You are hereby ordered to dismantle said structures within 30 days or face litigation. Continued refusal will be considered willful defiance of community standards and subject to daily fines of $500. $500 per day. For 6 inches of air above water I've owned since Eisenhower. I set the letter down on my kitchen counter, poured a cup of coffee, and laughed until my ribs hurt. Then I faxed it straight to Jacob Miller, my lawyer. He called back 5 minutes later, still chuckling. "Adam, I've seen some wild HOA nonsense, but this might top my list. They can't fine you. They don't have jurisdiction. They can't even enforce their bylaws beyond their own platted lots. You could build a floating castle and they couldn't do a damn thing." That made me feel better for about 10 minutes until Lucy showed up in person. It was a Wednesday morning, humid enough to melt asphalt. I was cleaning solar panels near the dock when I heard heels clicking on gravel. Lucy appeared, flanked by 2 men in polo shirts, carrying clipboards. "Mr. Cook," she began, smiling with all the warmth of a crocodile, "I'm here on behalf of Cedar Ridge to inform you that your non-compliant dock will be removed if you don't cooperate." Removed? I wiped sweat from my brow. "By who?" "By our contractor," she said smoothly. "We've scheduled an environmental cleanup. You're technically obstructing access to a shared waterway." I looked past her to the lake, my lake where sunlight glimmered off water my grandfather dug with his own shovel. "Ma'am," I said, "the only thing you're sharing is my patience." The clipboard guys exchanged nervous glances. One whispered, "He's not even in the HOA, Lucy." Her smile froze. He's adjacent, which means he benefits from our maintenance. Maintenance, I laughed. You mean the landscaping crew that blows dust into my face every morning? Yeah, thanks for that. Her jaw twitched. You'll be hearing from our attorney. Can't wait, I said. Bring snacks. Court's long. They stormed off her heels, sinking into the soft dirt by the water. That night, as fireflies blinked over the reeds, I realized Lucy wasn't bluffing. She'd crossed from irritation into obsession. The next morning, county code enforcement knocked on my door again. This time, it was a younger inspector, clipboard trembling. Sir, I'm sorry. I got a complaint about unsafe electrical wiring near your dock lights. I pointed to the solar setup, marine-rated, fully grounded, inspected last year. He looked, nodded, and muttered, yeah, she's wasting everyone's time. 3 visits in 2 weeks, all baseless. It was clear Lucy was using every agency she could as her personal weapon. So I decided to fight back with something she didn't have documentation. Every noise violation, every fake inspection, every letter I logged it, photographed it, time-stamped it, even kept copies of the envelopes because my granddad always said paper beats power. Meanwhile, the noise harassment got worse. The landscaping crew started running chainsaws at sunrise. A leaf blower orchestra performed outside my property line daily. I'd be casting my fishing line when suddenly, brrr, the symphony of suburban warfare. I tried talking to the crew, offered cold water, even joked, you boys trying to set a record. One of them shrugged. Lady pays overtime to work this side every day. We don't ask why. Lucy was literally paying people to make my life miserable. Then came the Facebook campaign. One morning, my neighbor, old Mrs. Henderson, knocked on my door holding her iPad. Adam, you seen this? She asked, eyes wide. On the Cedar Ridge Facebook group, which I wasn't even part of, Lucy had posted, some individuals nearby continue to violate community harmony. Fishing activities have led to contamination, unsafe conditions, and property devaluation. We urge residents to report suspicious behavior immediately. There were over 100 comments, half from people agreeing, the other half wondering who she was talking about. She never said my name, but the attached photo of my dock made it obvious. Mrs. Henderson snorted. She's lost her damn mind. Everyone knows you keep that lake cleaner than the county pool. Still, it stung. You can't out-argue gossip, especially in neighborhoods where people treat HOA gossip like Sunday scripture. That night, I sat on my porch with a beer, staring at the moon's reflection on the lake. The water rippled calm and ancient, completely indifferent to human nonsense. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just about pride. This was about legacy. My grandfather's sweat built this lake. My father's ashes were scattered here. And now some self-appointed suburban monarch was trying to claim it with paperwork and attitude. No, not happening. So I called Jacob again. I want to go on offense. He laughed. You mean sue her? Not yet, I said. First, I want to know why she's so obsessed. Jacob promised to dig into county filings. A week later, he called with something interesting. You're going to love this, Adam. The original developer of Cedar Ridge Suncrest Realty never filed a proper easement for lake access. The next few days, my kitchen table looked like a war room, stacks of paper, legal pads, old deeds, and a mug of cold coffee that hadn't moved in 12 hours. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lucy Parker standing at my fence, smirking like she already owned the place. So I decided to dig, not with shovels like my grandfather, but with paperwork. The county courthouse was an old brick building downtown, the kind that still smelled like mildew and bureaucracy. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I made my way to the basement archives. The clerk behind the glass window was a woman in her late 60s with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain. Her nameplate read, Martha Lopez. What are you looking for, hon? She asked. Land deeds, I said. Cook property filed around 1,950-something. It's the one with the spring-fed lake off County Road 219. Her eyebrows went up. You mean the Cook Lake? Haven't heard that name in a while. She shuffled through her files, then disappeared into a back room. 10 minutes later, she returned with a stack of folders so old they were yellowed and bound with string. Be careful with those, she said. Some of those signatures are older than you. I thanked her and sat down at one of those heavy oak tables that have probably witnessed a century of property feuds. As I opened the first folder, the smell of aged paper hit me, that dusty sweetness of history. The earliest document was dated 1954. My grandfather, Harold J. Cook, had bought the land directly from a tobacco company, liquidating assets after the crop crash. The document wasn't just a deed, it was practically a novel. The wording was written in that old legal English that sounds like it came from the Bible, including all water rights surface and subsurface springs, tributaries, and the flow therefrom held in perpetuity. That last word stopped me cold. Perpetuity, forever. It meant my grandfather hadn't just bought dirt and trees, he'd bought every drop of water that flowed through that spring system. I flipped through the maps attached hand-drawn with faded blue ink, marking out the aquifer paths. The main spring that fed our lake traveled underground for nearly a mile before surfacing again in the new Cedar Ridge estates, their fancy wells drilled directly into my water source. I leaned back, stunned. Lucy Parker wasn't just harassing me, she was illegally tapping into my family's water and had the nerve to claim I was trespassing on her property. I called Jacob immediately. He picked up on the second ring. "Jacob, you sitting down?" "Always am when clients say that," he said. "I found the original deed. The water rights are ours. Surface and subsurface in perpetuity. That means the aquifer under Cedar Ridge belongs to me." Silence. Then a low whistle. "Adam, that's not just a defense. That's a nuclear weapon. You could charge them for 15 years of unauthorized water usage. Or," I said slowly, "I could use it to make them stop." Jacob chuckled. "You're a better man than most. But let's document it before you get noble. We spent hours going over the language. Every clause, every signature, every reference point." Jacob confirmed what I already knew: the law was airtight. Unless someone had formally purchased or transferred those rights, they remained mine, and there was no record of any transfer. When I left the courthouse that evening, the air outside felt different, heavier, electric. Like the moment before a thunderstorm, Martha caught me at the door. "You found what you needed." "Oh, I found more than that," I said. She smiled knowingly. "You know, the developers that built Cedar Ridge, they swore up and down they'd respect environmental features. But they sure didn't check the old water maps. Most of that neighborhood sits right on top of federally designated wetlands." "Wetlands," I repeated. She said, sipping her coffee. "Legally protected. Means you can't alter the drainage dump chemicals or change water flow without a federal permit. I remember signing those papers myself when I worked full-time here. My brain started connecting dots like a crime board. Wetlands. Protected water systems. HOA landscaping crews running mowers to the edge of the water, dumping fertilizer, blowing debris into the lake. Lucy wasn't just trespassing, she was violating federal environmental law. I went home that night and pulled up my drone footage, the videos I'd taken over the years, just for fun, showing the lake and surrounding trees through the seasons. And sure enough, there it was, the HOA's contractors spraying pesticide mist less than 5 feet from the shoreline. Green water streaks where runoff trickled down their manicured lawns and into my lake. Evidence. Beautiful time-stamped evidence. The next morning, I drove back to Martha's office with a flash drive full of photos and videos. She laughed when she saw the file names. "Oh, honey, you're about to make some people real nervous." She helped me file an environmental concern report with the county. It wasn't a full complaint yet, just a notification of potential violations. Enough to start a paper trail. Then, just for fun, I printed one of the drone stills showing their landscaping crew dumping fertilizer-laced grass clippings right into the drainage ditch that feeds the spring, and mailed it anonymously to the HOA board's address with one line typed across the bottom. "You might want to tell your president that dumping into federally protected wetlands carries up to $50,000 per day in fines. No signature, just karma." By Friday, I started noticing something strange. The leaf blowers were gone. The landscapers vanished. Even Lucy stopped driving past my property every morning. For the first time in months, the lake was quiet again. But quiet doesn't mean over. Saturday evening, as the sun dipped low, I saw headlights creeping down the dirt road. A sleek black SUV stopped by the fence engine idling. Lucy stepped out alone, her designer heels sinking into the mud. "Mr. Cook," she called, voice tight. "We need to talk." I stayed on my porch, hands in pockets. "About what? 6 inches or 60 years?" Her lips pressed into a hard line. "You've been making threats." "Threats," I said, genuinely amused. "You poisoned my lake. With diesel fumes, harassed me with inspectors, and tried to demolish my dock. I filed paperwork." "That's not a threat, Lucy, that's procedure." She took a step closer, the reflection of the dying sun turning her face red. "You don't understand the position you're in. If you keep this up, I will make your life what miserable." I interrupted. "You already tried that. Didn't work." Her jaw clenched. "You think some old papers give you power here?" I smiled. "Not power. Ownership." She froze, eyes narrowing. "What did you say? Ask your husband," I said. Greg's landscaping company's been dumping fertilizer into federally protected wetlands. Oh, and by the way, every drop of water under your neighborhood belongs to me. Have a nice night." I turned and went back inside, leaving her standing in the mud heels, sinking deeper with every second. That night, I poured a glass of whiskey and stared out the window as fireflies blinked across the water. I could almost hear my grandfather's voice. "Water is freedom, boy." I finally understood what he meant. This wasn't about land anymore. It was about leverage, and Lucy Parker had just handed me the perfect one. For about 3 blessed weeks, everything went quiet. No more fake inspectors, no more leaf blower warfare. Even Lucy's Lexus stopped prowling past my fence like a shark that smelled paperwork instead of blood. I almost started to think she'd given up. Then the mail came. 3 letters, 3 agencies. The first from the Department of Environmental Quality, requesting access to inspect potential pollution sources on my property. The second from Fish and Wildlife Services, concerning possible interference with migratory bird patterns. And the third from the County Health Department, stating that multiple complaints had been filed, alleging contamination from my dock lights. 3 letters, 3 absurdities. I called Jacob the lawyer. "She's doing it again," I said, sliding the stack under my phone camera. He sighed. "Weaponized bureaucracy. Classic HOA move. She probably typed these complaints from her home office wearing pearls and drinking overpriced Chardonnay." Well, I said, she's about to find out government employees hate busy work. The next morning, the first inspector arrived, a woman in khakis and a sun hat carrying a clipboard the size of a tombstone. "Sir," she said politely, "we got a report of possible habitat disruption for migratory herons." I looked behind her. 4 herons were literally standing on my dock. "Do they look disrupted to you?" She tried not to laugh. "Honestly, no. But I still have to file a report." So I gave her coffee, showed her around, explained how the lake was spring-fed and cleaner than the municipal reservoir. By the time she left, she was shaking her head. "Someone's wasting my department's time. I'll make sure this goes nowhere." By week's end, I'd hosted half the agencies in the county. Health inspectors, code enforcement, even a guy from the EPA wearing a hazmat vest like he was about to storm Chernobyl. "Mr. Cook," he said, squatting by the water with a testing strip, "someone claimed you were dumping solvents." I raised an eyebrow. "Solvents I fish, sir. My most dangerous chemical is sunscreen." He smiled reluctantly. "Yeah, I figured." He packed up, muttering, "We'll mark this one as unfounded." And that's how Lucy's perfect little plan backfired. Because here's the thing, when you treat civil servants like attack dogs, they eventually realize they're being used. By the 5th visit, they were practically my friends. We shared coffee, small talk, and mutual irritation at that HOA woman. One of them, a retired county clerk helping part-time Martha Lopez, the same silver-haired saint from the archives, showed up one afternoon with a folder under her arm. "Adam," she said, "you didn't get this from me." She slid the folder onto my kitchen counter. Inside were copies of the original Cedar Ridge development permits, yellowed but legible. Red stamps all over them. Wetlands Protection Clause. Federal oversight required. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "Those developers promised the county they'd preserve every natural water feature on this land forever," she said. "Federal law. If they or the HOA mess with that chemical runoff, illegal landscaping, you name it, it's a violation of Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. That's serious jail time, honey." I whistled. Lucy Parker just turned a property squabble into a federal offense. Martha grinned. "Guess she's smarter than all of us combined." That night I started connecting dots. Lucy's landscapers, Green Vista, run by her husband Greg, had been trimming right up to the waterline for months. I'd watched them dump grass clippings, fertilizer bags, even mulch runoff straight into the drainage ditch that fed my lake. I didn't need imagination. I had footage. So, I set up my GoPro in the oak tree near the shoreline. Every Saturday at dawn, the crew came like clockwork, diesel mowers humming exhaust, blowing over the lake, and those same idiots sweeping yard waste right into the water. By the 3rd week, I had hours of video, time-stamped, high resolution, undeniable. The next day, I ran the Green Vista company license through the state's public business registry. The result made my coffee go cold. Owner, Gregory Parker. Co-owner, Lucy Parker. I laughed out loud. The HOA president's husband owned the same company illegally, dumping debris into federally protected wetlands, and she had the nerve to accuse me of polluting. I called Jacob giddy like a kid on Christmas morning. "I've got them," I said. "Video's ownership records everything." "Send it all," he said. "We'll make sure it lands on the right desk." We didn't just send it to the county, we sent it to EPA Region 4, the state's Environmental Enforcement Division. Within 48 hours, I got a call from a man named Jim Dalton, field investigator. His voice had that no-nonsense southern growl you hear from men who've spent their lives hauling lawbreakers to court. "Mr. Cook, I've reviewed your footage," he said. "You realize this is a textbook Clean Water Act violation, right?" I was starting to suspect, I said dryly. "Well, congratulations. You just helped us build a case that'll make some developer sweat bullets. Expect inspectors this week." By Thursday, 3 trucks rolled down my dirt road, EPA logos on the sides, men in safety vests, unloading testing kits and sample containers. Lucy must have seen them because 10 minutes later, her Lexus pulled up across the fence. She got out sunglasses on fake smile plastered across her face. "Mr. Cook," she said sweetly. "What's going on?" I turned, holding my coffee. "Oh, just some friends of yours checking on that landscaping you love so much." Her smile faltered. "You called the EPA," I shrugged. "They called me. Apparently someone's been violating federal wetlands law." She went pale. "You can't prove anything." "Sure I can," I said. "Your husband's company logo is visible on 3 trucks, and the EPA's watching your crew dump yard waste like it's confetti." Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then she spun on her heel, nearly slipping in the mud, and stormed back to her car. That was the moment I realized the war had shifted. No more bluffing, no more noise harassment. Lucy had crossed from HOA nuisance into criminal liability, and the government was now in my corner, but bureaucracies move slow. I knew she wouldn't just sit quietly waiting for justice. People like Lucy don't surrender, they double down. Sure enough, 2 days later, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper, typed, anonymous. "Stop before someone gets hurt." I took a photo, bagged it in a plastic sleeve, and mailed it straight to Jacob. His reply was simple: "Good, she's scared." Meanwhile, the EPA wasn't just verifying my videos, they were uncovering years of violations. Over-applied fertilizers, unreported chemical usage, illegal irrigation pumps pulling straight from the aquifer. Dalton called me again, chuckling darkly. "Mr. Cook, your neighbor's HOA may have just earned itself a federal audit." "I'll send balloons," I said. By the end of that month, the Parker's company lost 2 municipal landscaping contracts. Word travels fast when you're under environmental investigation. But the real victory wasn't in fines or paperwork. It was in the silence. For the first time in months, I could fish without the roar of mowers or the drone of leaf blowers. The water started clearing up, sunlight shimmering again through the shallows. It almost felt like the lake was healing itself. Still, I wasn't naive. I knew Lucy wasn't done. She was the type who'd rather burn her empire than admit defeat. And sure enough, a week later, another card appeared under my windshield wiper, this time from a chemical supply company called Clear Blue Solutions. No note, no message, just a business card that smelled faintly of chlorine. I turned it over and saw something scribbled in blue ink: "Emergency pond treatment, $3, 500 paid cash." Lucy Parker wasn't surrendering. She was preparing for chemical war. The first thing I smelled was metal. Not the kind from a workshop, this was sharp chemical biting. It was late Sunday evening when I turned off the highway and rolled down the dirt road toward home. The crickets were silent. Even the frogs that usually sang from the reeds were gone. That kind of quiet, it's never natural. My headlights swept across the lake and my stomach turned. The water shimmered under the moonlight, not silver but blue-green, like someone had poured liquid antifreeze into a glass of death. I parked, stumbled down the slope, and the smell hit full force. Copper sulfate. Burned nostrils, stung eyes, left a taste like a mouthful of pennies. Big Grace, my favorite bass, the one I'd fed every morning, floated belly up next to the dock. Around her, hundreds of fish drifted their scales, catching the moonlight like sequins at a funeral. I couldn't even breathe. For 3 years, I'd watched that fish grow. Every morning at 6, she'd rise near the dock for a handful of worms or bread. She'd follow my reflection across the planks like a pet dog. Now, she was a corpse. I knelt, touched her slick, lifeless body, and my hands shook with fury. Then I saw it, a tire track in the mud near the dock, fresh with bits of blue residue spattered along the edge. A truck had been here recently, heavy wheels, dual axles. I followed the trail a few yards until it merged with the road. Something glinted in the dirt, a business card half soaked by dew. Clear Blue Solutions, Commercial Aquatic Algae Control. A phone number. A scribbled note in blue pen, $3, 500 cash, emergency service. And beneath it a signature, faint but unmistakable. L. Parker. I froze. Lucy had actually done it. She'd poisoned my lake. I didn't call her. I didn't even yell. I called 911. The dispatcher's tone changed when I said chemical dumping. She transferred me to the county's environmental emergency line. A gravel-voiced man named Jim Dalton answered. "Sir, slow down," he said. "You're saying you smell copper sulfate. Smell it, I'm breathing it," I snapped. "There are hundreds of dead fish, blue foam on the shore, and tire tracks from a commercial truck." Dalton's tone hardened. "Don't touch anything. Don't let pets near the water. Keep all evidence intact. I'm on my way." He showed up 45 minutes later with a white pickup truck full of testing gear. The man looked like he'd wrestled more polluters than paperwork, sunburned face, rolled-up sleeves, steel-toed boots. He didn't waste time. He dipped a glass vial into the water, added a reagent drop, and waited. The liquid turned deep purple, almost black. He looked up at me, jaw tight. Industrial-grade copper sulfate, way above legal limits. "Whoever did this just sterilized your lake for years. Can you prove who did it?" I asked, though I already knew. He took the soggy business card from my hand, slid it into an evidence bag. "If this signature matches the HOA president's, then yes. This isn't vandalism, it's felony destruction of property. Possibly a federal environmental crime if it spreads downstream." Dalton photographed everything, the card, the truck tracks, the dead fish lined up like casualties of war. He even asked to check Mrs. Henderson's doorbell camera across the road. She was the kind of old lady who kept everything recorded. 10 minutes later, we were staring at footage from her tablet, a white service truck marked Clear Blue Solutions pulling up to the lake at 2:17 a.m., two figures in protective suits unloading hoses and containers. By 2:43 a.m., they were gone. Dalton's voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "That's all I need. Get some rest, Mr. Cook. This is officially a crime scene. Rest I couldn't even think." I spent that night sitting on the dock, surrounded by the smell of death. The water that had once reflected the stars now looked like liquid poison. My family's lake, my inheritance, was gone. At sunrise, my wife Sandra found me still there, staring at the water. She sat beside me, silent, then whispered, "She killed it, didn't she?" I nodded. "She killed everything." We started collecting what we could. Every dead fish, every frog, every bird that had landed by mistake. Filled trash bags until our hands cramped. Each splash of another body into the bag sounded like betrayal. But grief does something strange. It sharpens focus. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was calculating. While Sandra documented photos, I pulled out the old utility schematics I'd kept from my solar business plans, showing the aquifer lines beneath Cedar Ridge. I'd installed solar pumps on half those houses over the years. I knew exactly how their water system worked, and it hit me. Every drop of water Lucy's HOA used, every shower, every coffee maker, every fancy filtered fridge came from this lake's spring system. The same aquifer, the same poisoned water. I froze. "Oh my God," I muttered. Sandra looked up. "What? She didn't just poison our lake," I said. "She poisoned her own neighborhood." By Monday morning, I was standing in a water testing lab 40 miles away, holding 3 mason jars of lake water. The technician, a woman named Dr. Alvarez, ran a spectrometer test. She frowned. "Mr. Cook, these levels are dangerous. 4 times higher than EPA drinking standards. Long-term exposure could cause liver damage." I smiled grimly. "You might want to check the wells in Cedar Ridge next." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because their HOA president just hired someone to dump poison in my lake," I said. "And their wells pull from the same aquifer." She stared for a long moment, then whispered, "Oh boy." By noon, Dalton called again. "We've confirmed it. Same chemical compound, same lot number as the purchase order made under Lucy Parker's name. She even paid the company cash, probably thought no paper trail meant no crime." "She's smarter than she looks," I said. "Just not smart enough." He laughed. "The EPA's coming in. This crossed state and federal lines. You're about to have some company." That night, the local news ran a teaser, "Private lake contaminated by chemical dumping, investigation underway." They didn't name names, but Cedar Ridge residents didn't need to guess. The HOA Facebook group exploded with speculation. "Weird taste in the water," one wrote. "Kids got stomachache," as another posted. Lucy tried damage control. She posted an official statement calling the reports rumors and slander. She even blamed seasonal algae bloom discoloration. But photos of the dead fish were everywhere. By Wednesday, homeowners were calling the county demanding tests. When the results came back, the panic started. Copper sulfate contamination confirmed in 5 wells, then 10, then 30. Parents started buying bottled water. Someone sent a drone over the HOA clubhouse pool. It glowed faintly turquoise. Lucy's perfect suburban empire was turning toxic, literally. I sat on my porch sipping coffee, watching the sun rise over the poisoned lake. I should have felt satisfaction, but instead I felt the weight of it. Hundreds of families now drinking the same poison meant for me. Sandra squeezed my hand. "You didn't do this," she said quietly. "I know," I whispered, "but I'm still the one who's going to fix it." Because I wasn't done. I'd buried my fish, but I hadn't buried justice. Lucy Parker had crossed the line from harassment to environmental terrorism, and I was about to make sure the whole country knew her name. I didn't sleep that week. Between reporters knocking on my gate and neighbors begging me for answers, I barely had time to think. The irony was unbearable for years. Lucy Parker had tried to drive me out for ruining the view. Now she had poisoned the very water that fed her kingdom. But the rage that had kept me awake for nights was starting to turn into something colder, more focused strategy. Monday morning I drove straight back to the courthouse. Not to complain this time, but to arm myself. The same dusty basement, same hum of old fluorescent lights, same smell of paper and sweat. I dug through property archives until I found what I was looking for. The Suncrest Realty Development file from 2008, the one that created Cedar Ridge Estates. Inside was a permit application that made me grin so wide it hurt. Water source independent private wells drawing from regional aquifer system beneath parcels 101, 173. Regional aquifer system, the one mapped directly under my grandfather's property. They'd never purchased water rights, not once. They'd just drilled and assumed ownership. And thanks to my grandfather's 1,954 deed, every drop in that aquifer was still legally mine. I snapped photos of every page, every signature, and sent them to Jacob Miller. 2 hours later, he called me back, half laughing, half stunned. "Adam, do you realize what you're sitting on?" "Oh, I realize," I said. He cleared his throat. "We're talking 15 years of unauthorized water usage. 847 homes. Average consumption at maybe $50 per month in equivalent rights value. You do the math." I did. It came out to over $30 million. "That's obscene," Jacob said. "We could sue the developer, the HOA, even individual homeowners. You'd win." I shook my head. "I'm not bankrupting my neighbors. Most of them are good people. I want one thing: Lucy Parker accountable and the lake restored. Then we hit her with the full case," he said, "and use the rest as leverage." That night I sat at my desk surrounded by photos, test results, and legal drafts. I couldn't help but hear my grandfather's voice again. Water is freedom. Maybe he'd known someday we'd have to fight for it. Sandra came in with 2 mugs of coffee. "You've been staring at those papers for hours," she said. "This isn't paperwork," I murmured. "It's a loaded gun." We reached out to Rebecca Cho, an environmental attorney in Raleigh whose reputation was legend. She'd taken down 2 corporations for groundwater contamination and once forced a county to replace an entire sewer system after a cover-up. Rebecca reviewed my documents for 20 minutes, then looked up, eyes gleaming like a hawk spotting prey. "Mr. Cook," she said, "this isn't a lawsuit, it's a masterpiece. You own the water they've been using, and the HOA president contaminated it. That's civil liability, environmental negligence, and criminal destruction all rolled into one. I can build this case in my sleep." "Good," I said, "because I want it watertight." She smiled, pun noted. Rebecca called in a hydrogeologist from North Carolina State, Dr. Henry Collins, to verify the flow of the aquifer. I watched from the dock as he lowered sensors and dye tracers into the lake, his equipment humming softly. After hours of measuring and mapping, he looked up. "Single-source spring system, Mr. Cook. This aquifer feeds directly into every residential well in Cedar Ridge. Once contamination enters here, it travels through porous limestone to each well within 6 weeks." He straightened up. "The contamination's already spreading. The data's undeniable. Perfect." I didn't want vengeance built on emotion. I wanted facts sharp enough to cut marble. Then came the journalist. Jacob connected me with Sarah Morgan, an investigative reporter who'd spent years exposing corrupt HOAs. Her articles had taken down 3 presidents and even inspired one state to rewrite its HOA statutes. When I laid out the documents and photos across my kitchen table, she just whispered, "Holy hell." "You can publish after we file," I told her. "Not before. I don't want her running." She nodded. "When this breaks, it's going to blow up nationally. HOA tyrant poisons her own neighborhood while stealing water rights. That headline writes itself." Rebecca, Dr. Collins, Sarah, and I formed a small war council. We spent hours crafting our plan like generals plotting an ambush. Phase 1 file federal claims for unlawful chemical dumping and water contamination. Phase 2 file state-level suits for destruction of property and harassment. Phase 3 serve Lucy Parker and the HOA simultaneously right before the press release. Timing was everything. Jacob called it Operation Full Flood. But here's the thing about strategy, it needs patience. And patience is something Lucy didn't have. While Rebecca drafted filings, Lucy started unraveling in public. Residents of Cedar Ridge were in panic mode, stomach cramps, headaches, metallic tasting, tap water. The HOA Facebook page became a riot. Lucy's posts grew more desperate by the day. Rumors of contamination are exaggerated. The lake is not connected to our wells. Certain individuals are spreading lies for personal gain. One of those certain individuals, apparently, was me. She never used my name, but everyone knew. Then came the rumor campaign. Fake accounts popped up accusing me of sabotaging my own lake for insurance money, of running a fraudulent solar company, even of poisoning the water myself to frame her. I could have sued her right then, but Rebecca told me to wait. Let her dig, she said. The deeper the hole, the better our view when she falls. And fall she did. See, Lucy forgot something crucial about bureaucracy. She wasn't the only one who could file complaints. Rebecca quietly sent our evidence packet to EPA Region 4's Enforcement Division and copied the State Department of Environmental Quality. Within 10 days, Cedar Ridge HOA received a formal notice of investigation. You could feel the panic ripple through the community. Suddenly, residents were demanding emergency meetings, calling for Lucy's resignation, asking about mysterious budget discrepancies. Because, as it turned out, Lucy had paid Clear Blue Solutions using HOA funds logged under landscaping maintenance. Sarah Morgan uncovered that gem after requesting HOA budget records through a whistleblower board member, Patricia Reed. The ledger showed an unapproved $3,500 cash withdrawal signed off solely by Lucy. I swear I could hear Jacob laughing 3 towns away, but I wasn't laughing yet. Because while Lucy's empire was cracking, she still hadn't faced the truth about the water, so I decided to make it personal. I drafted a letter, calm, polite, perfectly worded. Dear Mrs. Parker Per, our ongoing disputes regarding property boundaries. I wanted to clarify that my family retains legal ownership of all surface and subsurface water rights feeding the Cedar Ridge aquifer. Given recent contamination, I'd advise you to have your own water tested. I'm sure you'll find the results enlightening. Regards, Adam Cook. I printed it on crisp white paper and hand-delivered it to her mailbox. 2 days later, I watched her sprint from her house to her car, clutching that letter, screaming into her phone. Her Lexus peeled out of the driveway like a missile. I just sipped my coffee. By week's end, the first EPA results arrived: copper sulfate concentrations in Cedar Ridge wells 4 times above federal limits. The agency issued a public health advisory urging residents not to drink tap water until further notice. Panic turned into outrage. Homeowners demanded an emergency HOA meeting. Lucy tried to postpone it to avoid hysteria, but the board overruled her. Sarah was already prepping her article. HOA president accused of poisoning neighborhood water supply. Rebecca smiled when she read the headline draft. She's done, she said. One last push, and we end this. I didn't answer. I was watching the lake, still tinted faintly green from the poison. For 70 years, this water had fed crops, fish, families, and now it carried the evidence that would bring Lucy Parker down. You can destroy a doc, file lawsuits, or spread rumors, but you can't outrun what flows beneath your feet, because water remembers. And soon it was going to testify. When cornered animals panic, they don't run, they thrash. Lucy Parker was no different. The EPA investigation was barely a week old before she went full feral. It started with her desperate attempt to control the narrative. She summoned the entire HOA board to a closed-door meeting in the community clubhouse. Word spread fast. Cedar Ridge gossip moved faster than wildfire in July, and by sunset, half the neighborhood knew something big was coming. At 7 p.m., Lucy appeared in a pastel suit and fake calm, clutching a binder like a shield. We are facing a temporary water quality issue, she announced to the uneasy crowd. It's due to mineral fluctuations, nothing more. Please avoid panic or spreading misinformation. Someone in the back yelled. Then why's the EPA parked outside my house? Another shouted. My kid's been throwing up for 2 days. Lucy's smile cracked. That's unrelated, she said. There is no evidence linking our water supply to any alleged contamination. Certain individuals, she paused and glared straight at me, are attempting to exploit this tragedy for personal gain. The murmurs turned into angry whispers. Board member Patricia Reed, bless her backbone, stood up. Lucy, you withdrew $3,500 from HOA funds last month, labeled lake maintenance. You care to explain that? Lucy's eyes darted around like a cornered raccoon. That was for community upkeep. Community upkeep, Patricia shot back. You mean the midnight chemical dump that killed all the fish? Because that company's invoice has your signature. Gasps. A few phones rose to record. Lucy's face drained of color. Those records are private, she snapped. Not when it's our money, someone shouted. That night, she locked herself in her house, but her meltdown had only begun. The next morning, 3 brand new Facebook accounts appeared on the Cedar Ridge group, Truth for, Cedar HOA Watch, and Neighbor Justice. All of them posted at the same time, spreading the same story that I, Adam Cook, had poisoned my own lake for insurance money and revenge. They called me a fraud, a toxic scammer, and a paranoid redneck trying to extort honest homeowners. Problem was, Lucy wasn't good at pretending to be someone else. She kept using her favorite phrases: property values, community standards, aesthetic compliance. Within hours, people noticed. Comments flooded in Lucy, "We can literally tell it's you. Girl, log out of your burner account. You're poisoning the water in the Facebook feed now." When that backfired, she turned to bribery. Wednesday night, a man in a cheap suit knocked on my door. "Mr. Cook," he said, sweating through his collar. "Name's Rick Hansen, private investigator. Mrs. Parker would like to resolve this dispute privately." I raised an eyebrow. "Privately, huh? You mean off the record?" He forced a smile. "She's willing to offer a substantial settlement if you agree to withdraw your complaint." "How substantial?" He hesitated. 6 figures. Cash. "Tell her I said no," I replied. "And tell her to enjoy her prison commissary menu." He sighed. "She said you'd say that." Then he pulled a phone from his pocket and started snapping pictures of my truck, my yard, even my house number. I laughed. "Buddy, you better delete those. I've got cameras too." He didn't. So, when he tried to break into my truck at the hardware store the next afternoon, he didn't realize the police were already watching. The dash cam caught everything. Turns out Rick wasn't even licensed anymore. His PI certification had been suspended 2 years ago for evidence tampering. Lucy's fixer spent the night in county jail. I thought that might finally slow her down, but no. She had one more move, weaponizing the government again. Within days, I got hit with a wave of random investigations. The state licensing board questioning my solar business, an anonymous OSHA complaint about unsafe wiring, and even a zoning inspector claiming my dock violated modern safety codes. It was exhausting, but this time I was ready. Every call was recorded, every visit filmed. North Carolina is a one-party consent state, and I'd gotten very good at keeping my phone running in my shirt pocket. The inspectors quickly realized what was going on. One even laughed. "You must have pissed off the wrong woman," he said, while checking my perfectly legal dock. "Oh, she's been pissed off since she moved here," I said. "Now she's drowning in it." Meanwhile, the real fallout was hitting her hard. EPA agents started interviewing residents door to door, and word spread fast that Lucy had personally authorized the lake treatment. Parents demanded her resignation, homeowners refused to pay their dues, and Greg Parker, her husband, the co-owner of Green Vista Landscaping, was facing his own investigation for illegal dumping. By the end of the month, Greg packed up and left. His truck disappeared from the driveway, and Lucy's perfectly staged life began collapsing like a paper mansion in the rain. But desperation makes people stupid. 2 nights later, I was working late in my shop when I heard tires crunching on the gravel road. Headlights swept over my porch. Then came a knock, sharp, angry, deliberate. I opened the door, and there she was. Lucy Parker. No suit this time. Just jeans, messy hair, and a briefcase clutched so tight her knuckles were white. "Adam," she began, forcing a brittle smile. "Let's end this. You and me. No lawyers, no lawsuits." "I thought we already were in court," I said. She set the briefcase on the railing. The leather creaked as she opened it, revealing stacks of $100 bills. "At least $100, 000. "This is yours," she said. "Drop the charges. Sign this non-disclosure agreement and we can pretend this never happened." I stared at the cash, then at her. "You're bribing me on my own porch." "This is a good faith gesture," she hissed. "For both our reputations." "Good faith," I repeated. "That what you call chemical warfare now," her mask cracked. "You're going to regret this," she snapped. "I have connections. You have no idea who you're dealing with." I smiled. Funny. I was about to say the same thing. What she didn't know was that I was wired literally. Rebecca had suggested it days earlier after the PI incident. The tiny recorder taped under my shirt caught every word crystal clear. When she slammed the briefcase shut and stormed off, I didn't stop her. I didn't need to. The next morning, I emailed the recording to the county prosecutor, EPA, investigators, and Rebecca. Her reply came 5 minutes later. "That's felony obstruction and bribery." She just handed us the final nail. By now, Cedar Ridge was in chaos. The HOA's Facebook group was a digital war zone. People were demanding refunds for poisoned water, threatening lawsuits, and sharing screenshots of Lucy's deleted posts. Then, the health department dropped the hammer. Official advisory elevated copper sulfate levels detected in all tested wells. Water unsafe for human consumption. Avoid ingestion or bathing until further notice. The notice spread like wildfire. Local news vans camped outside the subdivision. Property values nosedived overnight. Real estate agents refused to list new homes. Cedar Ridge, once marketed as luxury lakeside living, was now trending online as the poisoned suburb. Lucy tried to play victim in a last-ditch PR move, claiming she'd been misled by contractors. But the EPA's investigation, combined with the recording of her bribe and the company invoice in her name, destroyed her narrative. Then came the medical fallout. Pediatricians started reporting elevated copper levels in several children. Nothing fatal, thank God, but enough to confirm what everyone already feared: the contamination had reached the aquifer. Parents were furious. They packed the HOA's next meeting, over 100 of them crammed into the small community hall, faces red with anger. Lucy stood on stage, pale and trembling, still pretending to be in charge. When she announced a special assessment fee of $500 per household to cover emergency water upgrades, the room erupted. "You poisoned us, and now you want us to pay for it," one father shouted. Another woman held up a medical bill. "My son's in the hospital, you witch." Lucy tried to keep her voice steady. "It's for infrastructure." But then Patricia Reed stepped forward, holding up a copy of the HOA's financial statement. "No, it's for you, Lucy, to cover the money you stole for that chemical hit job." Gasps again. Then the yelling started. "Resign. Arrest her. Get her off the board." Lucy's composure shattered. She screamed something incoherent about fake news and ungrateful neighbors, then fled the hall to a chorus of boos. That night, she posted one last message on the HOA's Facebook page before deleting her account entirely. "You people have no idea what kind of man Adam Cook really is. This isn't over." But everyone already knew what kind of man. I was the one who'd built his life beside a clean lake, who'd watched it die, and who wasn't afraid to fight back. Lucy Parker could delete her posts, but she couldn't delete the evidence, or the water, or the truth seeping through every pipe in her subdivision. And as I watched the news that night, footage of EPA hazmat suits lining my lake, reporters calling it one of the worst HOA scandals in state history, I knew something she didn't. This wasn't the end. It was the flood before the judgment. By the time the EPA finished testing the last of the wells, Cedar Ridge had gone from luxury living to a disaster zone. Every house was under public health warning. Parents filled bathtubs with bottled water for their kids. Local news vans parked along the boulevard like vultures circling a carcass. Lucy Parker, who once strutted around calling herself Madam President, now refused to leave her house. But her reckoning was coming. The county announced a public emergency meeting at the community center to address the contamination crisis. The place could only hold 200 people. 300 showed up. It was standing room only, the air thick with fear, anger, and burnt coffee. Sheriff deputies stood by the doors. EPA investigators sat at a long table up front, their laptops glowing. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras ready. Lucy sat at the far end of the panel, shoulders, tight face pale under her perfect makeup. She looked like a queen whose crown had turned to lead. Patricia Reed, now acting HOA chair, tapped the microphone. "We're here to hear the EPA's findings and discuss next steps." The lead investigator, Dr. Sandra Murphy, stood up and projected a map showing bright red areas spreading outward from my lake. "Copper sulfate concentrations are 4 times higher than federal safety limits," she said flatly. "The contamination originated here." She pointed straight at the lake, from an unregistered nighttime chemical dump. A murmur swept through the crowd. "Who authorized it?" someone demanded. Dr. Murphy didn't look at me. She looked at Lucy. "According to company records and financial transactions, Mrs. Parker paid for the treatment herself using HOA funds." The room froze. Lucy stammered, That's a lie. I was told it was a safe algae removal process." Patricia slammed a folder onto the table. "With cash at 2 a.m, Lucy's voice cracked. You didn't mean to poison 847 families." Patricia's voice shook with fury. "You didn't mean to use our money for your vendetta." People started shouting. "Arrest her. She poisoned our kids. She needs to pay." A sheriff's deputy stepped forward. "Order, please." Rebecca Cho rose from her seat beside me, calm as a storm about to break. "If I may, officer," she said, holding up a document. My client Adam Cook owns the surface and subsurface water rights to the aquifer beneath Cedar Ridge. This contamination doesn't just violate federal environmental law, it's the destruction of his legally protected property. She handed copies of my grandfather's 1954 deed to the EPA table. The phrase in perpetuity practically glowed under the fluorescent lights. The crowd gasped again. Dr. Murphy adjusted her glasses. So the contaminated water legally belongs to Mr. Cook. That's correct, Rebecca said. He's not just the victim here. He's the legal owner of every drop that now flows through this subdivision. Lucy leapt up. That's impossible. It's the law, Rebecca replied. And you broke it. The sheriff nodded to his deputies. Ma'am, please stand. What for? Lucy shouted. You can't. He read calmly from a folded paper. Lucy Parker, you are under arrest for felony, environmental destruction, embezzlement of HOA, funds obstruction of justice, and attempted bribery of a witness. Cameras clicked like fireworks. Lucy's perfect composure finally shattered. You don't understand. He ruined everything. The deputy cuffed her hands behind her back. Ma'am, you did that yourself. As they escorted her out, the room erupted not with chaos but with relief. Some people clapped. Others cried. Patricia put a hand over her heart. Rebecca turned to the EPA officials. We'll be filing a joint settlement proposal tomorrow. Full lake restoration funded by restitution and insurance. No back payments from residents. Just accountability. The lead investigator nodded. That's a fair resolution. I walked to the microphone. The cameras turned toward me, but I didn't look at them. I looked at the people, families who'd once glared at me, now hollow-eyed from weeks of bottled water and fear. Most of you know me as the guy who wouldn't stop fishing, I said quietly. A nervous chuckle rippled through the crowd. I never wanted a fight. I wanted peace. This lake belonged to my grandfather before most of us were born. He taught me one thing. Water's not just property, it's memory. You poison it, you poison yourself. Silence. Even the reporters stopped typing. I'm not suing any of you, I continued. You've suffered enough. I just want this lake restored, this community healed, and this story to mean something. Someone in the back yelled, You have my respect, Adam, and applause followed. Rebecca smiled at me. That's how you win without hatred, she whispered. 6 months later, the lake shimmered blue again. EPA crews removed the contaminated sediment, rebalanced the ecosystem, and stocked new base. Children came down with fishing poles and laughter instead of bottled water. The air smelled like honeysuckle again, not copper. Cedar Ridge transformed too. The HOA rewrote its bylaws from the ground up: transparent budgets, resident voting rights, independent audits, no unilateral decisions. They called it the Parker Rule. Ironically, Lucy's name became a symbol of everything they'd learned to avoid. Her trial ended swiftly. Guilty on all counts. 3 years in federal prison, 5 years probation, and 200 hours of environmental cleanup. Her law license revoked. Her husband divorced. Her house foreclosed. Sometimes karma doesn't whisper, it roars. As for me, I founded the Cook Environmental Trust with part of the settlement money. We built an education program for local schools. Every month, kids come to the lake to learn about ecology, water safety, and why doing the right thing matters more than power or pride. The lake has become what my grandfather always dreamed, a place of peace. And in a strange, poetic way, Lucy gave that to me by trying to take it away. You know, standing on that dock today, watching the sunset ripple across clean water again, I realized something. Justice isn't about revenge, it's about restoration, about turning pain into purpose. Lucy Parker poisoned my lake, but in the end, she only exposed her own corruption. The real victory wasn't her arrest, it was seeing a community rebuild from truth instead of fear. If you've ever been bullied, silenced, or cornered by people who think their title makes them untouchable, remember this. The truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand its ground long enough for the noise to collapse. That's what this story is really about. Not just lakes or laws, but courage, the quiet kind that refuses to give up. So tell me, what's the biggest battle you've had to fight for? What's yours? Drop your story in the comments below. And if you believe in standing up against arrogance and injustice, hit that subscribe button. Because somewhere out there, another HOA Karen is plotting, and together we'll make sure she doesn't win.